to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome back. It's the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast, and I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz and Jason Moore.
Welcome back, Jason. We missed you, man. It's been a little while.
Yeah. Well, it's been a couple weeks. We had Mike, and then you guys had the two-man show, and now we're back to talk some trades.
Love a good Dynasty trade. Have you guys made any Dynasty trades since the season has ended?
I have not. Have you?
I was hoping one of you would say yes, because then I feel like it brings life to the show. But quite frankly, I haven't even thought about Dynasty trades until prepping for this show. So now I'm excited to start trading again.
I mean, to be fair, the season just ended. This is
I know, but some people
you got to
are
be a
sickos,
real
man.
DJ. Oh, for sure. If an offer came through, I would be looking at it, and maybe now's the time to send some offers through. But yeah, we can't judge anyone for not having traded in the last week and a half.
For sure.
I've done some reconnaissance work in one of my leagues, and let me just put it this way. This is a great way to kind of field where things are, is you get to the end of the season, and there are people in your leagues that have a lot to say about the playoffs and what they think is right, what went wrong. And so in one of my leagues, it's a Superflex league, they started a discussion about quarterback ranks. And so they just decided to go 1 through 32, rank all the quarterbacks in the league. And it was really good for me to kind of see where there's some discrepancies. Now, I didn't put mine out there, but I got a ton of free info from one of my leagues to see where everybody, thinks. And so it's actually one of the players that I will talk about today. So it's the long con. That's what you need to do with you're conning your league, guys. That's all you're really trying to do.
I love that for you. Just kind of sitting back, taking it in, waiting to strike. So yeah, I'm excited to see what you have here for a trade candidate in the quarterback market, because a couple of my Superflex leagues, I have a locked-in guy that is a top 5 option, but getting that second quarterback makes such a big difference, especially if you think he can make a leap this year. So Kyle's going to tell us all how to win a Dynasty league on this very episode.
Yeah, you should have drafted Jaden Daniels last year. That's really what you needed to do, and not make any other
Bo
mistakes.
Nix.
I did that.
Obviously, I would have rather had Jaden Daniels, but Bo Nix, I got him, I think, of the third round of our main Dynasty league. That's worked out.
I took him at the top of a second in a Superflex, and then I traded him away after the first month.
Oh, that was a bad first month for Bo Nix.
Yeah, I thought I was doing all right, but I'm interested to hear our list today, because we have a approved trade targets list. It's actually Mike's list, and so I'm kind of glad he's not on this episode, because we don't need to hear about Mike's opinions today. The people on the podcast want to hear from us, but there will be an official list that's in our 2025 Dynasty Pass that comes out Super Bowl Sunday, where we work through all the rookies. We have production profile bets right now. You are starting to hammer the process of all 32 teams, and here's the contracts, here's the vacated targets. And from that, Mike creates a trade targets list. So this will be different, but our team is hard at work, and that's Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, it launches Super Bowl Sunday. You can get it anytime. The UDK Plus is really a year-round product now, with the fact that the Dynasty stuff launches so early. You're going to have the prospect guide, and then we'll have a couple different drops along the way. Major updates, obviously around the combine, around the NFL draft itself. As the whole season, ramps up for the 2025 NFL season, we'll be updating everything. But the UDK Plus has it all, so you can check that out, ultimatedraftkit.com.
Betz and I were talking earlier today because, he was working on the Cardinals. Betz is working on some NFC stuff. I'm working on some AFC stuff. And so, you're just kind of getting a top-down approach of this team, and it's just interesting because you and I get to funnel all of our analysis from the Cardinals and then kind of funnel it through. This is what Andy, Mike, and Jason think. This is their boots on the ground. But any quick takeaways for the Cardinals as you're working on that team, Betz?
I love that exercise every year, going through team opportunity and trying to figure out where different organizations are at from a draft pick standpoint, or free agency cap money that they have to spend, or players coming in or out, whatever the situation is, and how it affects the upcoming year or 2 years beyond when you think about Dynasty. And I knew Kyler signed that massive contract. I think it was 2 years ago. It was a 5-year deal. I didn't realize like where he ranks in terms of quarterback cap hits until I started doing this exercise. 7th in the NFL among all quarterbacks in cap hit in 2025. And it's like, man, for what they're paying him to do, he has not done it. And not just for fantasy, but like for NFL, real life NFL standpoint. So that was interesting to come across that. You'll find a lot more of those notes and nuggets in the Dynasty Pass.
Jason, do you just moan when you hear more Kyler stats? We talked about him on the main show on Tuesday, just kind of work through his season, but like there's more. There's so much meat left on the bone.
Yeah, there is more, and I think it can get better for Kyler. He is not a bad quarterback. I think he can be an NFL franchise quarterback, but I do not believe he can be an elite quarterback. He's had enough time. He's had enough excuses. He's had the weapons. He's had year 2s in the system and all the different things every year that's like, well, now it'll hit. And something is not elite about Kyler Murray. And it's a mental thing. It's so bizarre because some games he shows up and looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Really has a flawless game, just laying it over, over and under defenders at will, seeing the field, reading progressions, running when he should, and just you go, holy crap, how do you stop Kyler Murray? It's kind of like when you watch Jaden Daniels. You go, how do you actually stop it? Or Lamar, when you've got the dual threat ability, but you're such a good passer, that's where it's just impossible. And you have those games from Kyler, and then sometimes you show up and you don't got to do nothing to stop him. You just play some vanilla defense, and he'll just suck the whole game. So I don't know what to make of it, but 7th cap hit in the league, that actually feels about right. Not that he's the 7th best, but for the cycle of contracts,
right?
I figure in 2025 that means he'll be the 9th or 10th, depending on how many quarterbacks sign contracts this year. They're all going to, whoever signs will leapfrog Kyler. I'm sure Brock Purdy will be up higher. So, if you've got a quarterback that can play, at a professional level, you got to pay him that kind of money.
If you want all those insights, like we mentioned, ultimatedraftkit.com, our Dynasty Pass, and we're with you all offseason, especially for Dynasty. It doesn't end. The last couple of weeks, we talked about rookies. We did our rookie review on quarterbacks and running backs. Last week with Mike, we talked about wide receivers. We are not going to devote an entire episode to tight ends because beyond Brock Bowers, there wasn't much, guys. I mean, it really, if you look at who produced this past year, the next most targets was Theo Johnson at 43, and he missed, the last couple of months of the season. So I wanted to just mostly talk in our quick question about Brock Bowers and kind of contextualize him as a player and what he did. 153 targets, 112 receptions, 1,194 yards, 5 touchdowns. And we've talked at length the last couple of years about early tight ends usually being something to bet against. In the last couple of years, we've had Laporta, we've had Bowers. I think my conversation is not so much on do early tight ends hit or not, because over the course of the last decade, it's mostly been, if you bet against it, it's been wrong. Bowers is just a very different player. If we just looked at him as a wide receiver, throw out the name tight end, and just said as a pass catcher, he had a 24% target share. This is the same as Nico Collins. He was targeted on 28% of the team's first reads, same as Mike Evans. The same first down rate as Justin Jefferson, the same yards after catch as CeeDee Lamb, and he was essentially used as more than just a tight end. So, moving forward, I think my question is, where does he go in startups? How early in one quarterback leagues would you feel comfortable? And maybe, my other question I was thinking is, how long is he the tight end 1 in Dynasty?
Wow.
How many years? I mean, there's going to be a prospect 5 years from now that we didn't know existed that maybe is really, really good. But Brock Bowers is probably different than any other tight end we've dealt with. But let's first start off. How early would you take him in a one quarterback startup?
I could tell you the the spot where I would consider, where I would start asking the him or question. And that would be the number 4 pick. So for me, I don't know if that's higher than you guys, but Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, those guys, excuse me, those guys are ahead of him. I'm not going to take him over one of those 3 elite young wide receivers. After that, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Puka, Nico. You can have a conversation about whether Brock would be more valuable than those players, or if you are willing to take, the Bijan Robinson, the young stud running back in a startup. I'm not doing that in the first round as much. I think I probably do pull the trigger at 4, because when I look at what Brock Bowers can do positionally, I can make up ground by not having Amon-Ra and finding other capable wide receivers, putting it together by a committee. You can't really replicate what a player like Brock Bowers can do. And while we had the Sam Laporta letdown in year 2, Sam Laporta did not come into the league supposed to be this this freakish prospect. I can't think of another tight end prospect, because we're NFL guys. I am an NFL guy. I don't really watch the college football season. I'm too busy with the NFL. And then, after that ends, I'll start scouting the upcoming players. You hear the big giant names, the Janties of the world. You hear about them all year long. There's never been another prospect where I've heard about Brock Bowers at tight end for multiple years.
Right. Like since he was a freshman.
Yes, it was years ago. It was like Brock Bowers is the next great thing. So because he was supposed to be that good, drafted as high as it was, and then had the rookie season he has, I think we can all have supreme confidence. It's not going away. Even if he's not the number 1 tight end next year or the next year or the next year, he's going to be a great tight end, a difference-making fantasy asset, and it should be for a long time at a position where you can't find them. I won a lot of championships with Travis Kelce, because when you do have that separator at a position, it's an unfair advantage. So I would take him 4. What about you, Betz?
Yeah, the first kind of number as far as where I would take him that just came to mind without listing names was like, I don't know, 7th overall, 6th, somewhere in that range. But then when you start to list the wide receivers, it's like, okay, yeah, like that, I would take him probably ahead of those guys, behind like the big 3 or the big 4. He's just, like you said, a difference maker. And if you feel like this is the next Travis Kelce for fantasy, as far as like this is the tight end 1 or 2 every season for the next, assuming health, for the next 8 to 10 years, think about the unreal advantage that is over your league mates. If that does come to fruition, there's nothing in his profile that says it won't, or that, it's a bad bet. Obviously it's lofty standards and he has to do a lot to keep doing it, but he just had the best rookie season we've ever seen for a tight end. And, Kyle, like you mentioned the targets, 153. Just for context, like here's the wide receivers that saw the same or more than Brock Bowers. Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, Justin Jefferson, and Garrett Wilson both had 153. That's the end of the list. So just from like the dude commands the offense standpoint, and this is with a bad team, right? And pretty lackluster quarterback play. Like imagine if he actually does get a quarterback one day, or a head coach or an offensive coordinator that really can unlock him even beyond this, score more touchdowns. Like the ceiling is immense. So yeah, somewhere in the top 6-7 picks for me, no question.
I think my bias is, taking a tight end that early. That's never something I've done before. That's not usually my brand. But when I look at the names, 6 or 7 kind of feels right. I think I would take Neighbors ahead of him.
Neighbors would be the biggest. Like I would take Neighbors ahead of Amon-Ra, and so that's where at 4, Neighbors versus Brock is the biggest question to me.
Yeah, and I think so. You're going to see a lot of conversation about Gibbs or Bijan somewhere in the first round, and I don't think any of us want to say anything negative about it. I think strategy-wise, it's just not something we usually do, because the conversation will change. Like if you would have taken Brees at that spot, 2 years ago, you would have gotten a year
last year.
Yeah, but you're looking back later, and so for running back, I'm going to talk about running back today. I'd rather be a year early of being out on a player than hold on to a player and then kind of get this sunk cost. So for me, I think Bowers is like 6 or 7. Like I really like CeeDee Lamb. I think it's still a coin flip. I think CeeDee's just going to be high floor for the next 4 or 5 years too. So I don't blame anyone there. And then my final question is this, because there's people out there that are playing in tight end premium leagues where you get 1.5 points per reception. Is Brock Bowers worth, would you take him at 101 or 102?
I doubt it.
I couldn't do it.
I don't think I would do it. I don't usually move tight ends significantly in those tight end premium leagues. It's kind of like when you go to a 6 point per passing quarterback touchdown league and everyone wants to overinflate the quarterbacks. It's like, well, it happens for all of them. And obviously the gap for a guy that can get 153 targets, you get really, really excited about what that could be. That being said, this season, you know, if you told me this is the most targets no matter how incredible he is and he could still get better, if you said 153 targets is the most he ever gets in his career, I could believe that. That's an enormous number in a year where they traded Devontae Adams. You know, they had Jacoby Myers miss games. There was no other option to even throw the ball to really for this team. It's not going to be that way over the rest of his career. It's not just going to be Brock Bowers and a hodgepodge of nobodies to throw the ball to. And so you could see that number become, you know, in the 120, 140s, even if the efficiency goes up. So in tight end premium leagues, for me, I probably still have him at that 4 spot.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. I'm with you guys on that.
Okay, one more fun question here. Do you believe that he at one point will break the all-time receptions record in a season? So he was close this year. It was 116 of when Ertz said it. So do you think he breaks that in his career?
I do.
I'm going to say not in 17 games. So yes, he will break it, but it'll be once the NFL goes to 18-game seasons, which is not really the question you're asking. I think you know, on a receptions per game basis, I do think this will probably be the highest.
That's a question I ask a lot of times when I look at seasons. I go, is this the best season that they're ever going to have? Or is this the most receptions? Like, what are the odds when I look at that? And it's when you get somebody's first year, that piece of data just mounts up so much the rest of their career. You hold on to it like, I've seen what they can be. And, you know, that's what we did with Odell Beckham. It's like those first 2 years weighed so much for us to buy in, year out. And so for Bowers, 112 in a rookie season is crazy. But the makeup of the team, like I'm interested when we go to that team and look at how they decided to shake up their targets, you know, how they decided to, I mean, they had Luke Getsy for a while. It was a weird offense, put it that way. I mean, they had Desmond Ridder throwing the ball for a little bit. So Bowers will be an interesting offseason discussion still.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to hop in, talk about some trades. And like I said, Mike's not here. We don't need to hear about his list. This is our list.
Let's talk trades.
All right. We're first going to talk about trade for candidates, but we might need to have a discussion of what that means to you guys at this point in the offseason, because a trade for list in January looks a little different than a trade for list, let's say, after the NFL draft, because we get a lot more information. And if anything, right now, I'm assuming that there are players in leagues that are undervalued, and I want to kind of take advantage of that. But I also know that this is the point of the season where I just get things wrong. For instance, there was a Raiders tight end last year, I believe, on this show that I said, guys, I feel like you can get Michael Mayer really cheap.
Yeah. It seemed like a really good take. This was a second-round pick who was very highly touted, and on a team where, you know, you could really look at this team and see the need and the utilization of how they could use a tight end. And we were right, Kyle. They really could use a tight end. Just wasn't him.
Will you guys make sure that you file that away when I get like complaints and stuff? People, when they take their receipts of some of our shows, that you bring that data up?
Well, we got you, Kyle.
Oh, yeah, for
Don't
sure.
worry. We got you.
Okay. Yeah, so you're kind of guessing at this point, and I think it's okay. We're not here to say we know everything. all of our takes are going to be right. We're trying to play a game of probability. And at this point in the offseason, I want to acquire players that are cheaper than what they need to be, and people maybe aren't considering the upside case. Right now, like, there's opportunities in offense that I think people don't see. They don't know the contracts maybe of like, hey, this player's like coming off the payroll. And so there could be opportunities. But anything else, Betz, that you look at for trade for candidates?
I just think in general, trades are a cyclical thing in Dynasty. Like, there are certain times of the year that a player, like, I'd be more than happy to trade for that guy. But in like the same offseason cycle, there might be a time where it's like, okay, the market is out of control. The training camp hype is out of control. I could see where this goes south. I'm going to cash in now. So to me, this is, when we're doing this right now, we're trying to say, like, over the next several months and leading into the season, we think the value is going to increase on this player, or you'll get a pretty good return on their investment. Some of it's long-term outlook, some of it's short-term, but all of that goes into thinking about when to trade for somebody and if they are a quote-unquote good trade candidate. And let's be honest, this always comes down to price, right? We would love to trade for CeeDee Lamb and Brock Bowers and all those guys, but is it worth it to your Dynasty roster to give up everything to get them? Maybe not. So these are guys that we think you could get for reasonably cheap that might have a good return on your investment.
Another thing I just want to bring up is that Dynasty value, I feel like I brought this up in the offseason last year, is arbitrary. I mean, like, you can go to sites and you'll see certain values of this player is worth this much based on a ranking system. But there's so many different periods of time and timeframes that we're talking about here. So often we will say, for certain positions, look 2 to 3 years and kind of think about it that way. But for some people in your league, they're thinking, I've got this player for a decade. And Brock Bowers might be one of the few players that we could say, like, it's okay to kind of think about him for like 8 years. I mean, if you want to, but that's not normally how you trade in Dynasty because you don't know the 2032 draft or whatever. So I don't know. I think that's a part that a lot of these values we're assigning to a player in January. We're saying, I think this is what they're worth. This is where they're ranked. And at the end of the day, things will change. We talked about last year, Michael Thomas, of this is the value that you gave him after his season as he's the 101, and you're stupid if you don't take a player like him. Or I was in a startup draft, I think it was with Jason years ago, and I was like, I have to take Juju. He is the youngest wide receiver here, and I mean, I'm going to have him for life. And I remember the day my brother and I traded him away. We were just like, good riddance, man. I hated that we took you.
I had a lot of Juju across my Dynasty leagues, and he went from what was at one point, there was a specific point in time where he was pretty much consensus 101 in startups to, like, I forgot he's on my roster. Like, scroll. Oh, yeah, I've still got Juju. Maybe he could catch a touchdown or something. I mean, the NFL's crazy. If you go watch any game from 2 years ago, at any point in time, you just go and turn on a 2-year-old game, you're going to be like, what? Sam Bradford was a Cardinal? Like, you just don't remember this stuff. It's crazy.
That's a great point.
I think about that with Jarvis Landry. I remember having him on a team, and he was just balling out. It was a full PPR league. And I'm like, I am destroying my league mates with this player. And within a year or two, it was like, oh gosh, there's literally nothing here. He's Jamison Crowder. He's just never going to help my team at all. Betz, you have a name on here. I want you to start that. Honestly, I'm totally paralyzed with this player. No clue what to do. And you're telling me that I need to trade for him.
Well, I think this is a short-term window trade opportunity because in a very short amount of time, we're going to know what the Vikings are doing at quarterback definitively. But I think you call your shot and you trade for J.J. McCarthy now before we get the news of Darnold is either franchise tag and traded or he signs elsewhere or something. There's been a lot of kind of like rumblings behind the scenes that the Vikings had when they took J.J. McCarthy, and obviously the injury changed this, but when they took him, they envisioned him as their obviously, long-term answer, a quarterback. They traded up to get him at 10th overall. You don't do that unless you think that guy can be your franchise quarterback. Then you had the Sam Darnold explosion this year, and he was great, except for these last couple weeks, but in general, he was great. Even with all that going on, there was still like some of the beats from Minnesota and some of the guys that are really plugged in were kind of like, yeah, but J.J. McCarthy's the dude. Like, even with the Darnold situation, he's the dude. And I think the last couple of weeks really solidified that for the Vikings. And, this value won't last, I don't think, very long. Like I said, once we get the final news. So what is McCarthy as a quarterback? Who knows, man? Like who knows? Yeah, he's never taken an NFL snap outside of a couple in the preseason. But I'm here to tell you that I don't think it matters. Like truthfully, when you look at Kevin O'Connell's system, as long as he is competent, I am confident that JJ McCarthy will give us fantasy points, because you look at what happened since Kevin O'Connell arrived back in 2022. Kirk Cousins, who that version of Kirk Cousins was great, was the quarterback 7 in fantasy. Before he tore his Achilles the following year, quarterback 4. Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins combined were 5 of 9 in their starts in terms of being a top 12 quarterback. Those dudes aren't even NFL talents as far as starting quarterbacks. Then you get Sam Darnold, who's left for dead, the quarterback 8 this year in fantasy. When you're throwing to Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, we'll see what happens with Aaron Jones out of the backfield for maybe one more year. But you've got this skill group and a great play caller and a great coach who knows how to get the best from his guys. I trust Kevin O'Connell, and I trust that he will put JJ McCarthy in a position to succeed. Does that mean McCarthy's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback? No, I don't think so. I'd be shocked. But can he be a quarterback 1, something that you can get for QB2 prices in Superflex leagues? I think so. And when I think back to last year, Kyle and I did the quarterback class breakdown on, who could forget Kyle? It was Valentine's Day last year. What an episode.
Oh, wow. What a time
I went
to
back
spend
to that
together.
show doc and I found one of my favorite stats from McCarthy from that episode. Because coming out of Michigan, everybody was like, oh, this dude's just a game manager. He's not going to throw a lot of passes. And truthfully, like the raw data did agree with that, right? They ran the ball a ton at Michigan, but when he was asked to throw, no quarterback in this class threw a higher percentage of his pass attempts on 3rd and 6 and longer than McCarthy, and he was the most efficient one to do it. So in other words, the defense knew he was going to throw, and he was awesome when he did it. So I think Kevin O'Connell can put him in a position here to have success, and I definitely want to buy on McCarthy before the price gets out of control, which I think it will over the next couple of months.
I don't mind buying in a period of uncertainty. And you're not saying that this is going to work out. You're just saying that the price might go up when they say, hey, he's the dude, or Darnold signs with,
Exactly.
I don't know, the Browns or somebody dumb. It's like, there's a lot of volatility. That's what I'm hearing.
I love this call. If you hold firm and try to trade for him on the cheap. This isn't like go pay up because he's going to be so successful as a Viking. This is try to take advantage. In certain leagues, you're going to have managers of J.J. McCarthy who are terrified. They think that they're going to get nothing for him forever, that if they re-sign Darnold, and there will be talks of re-signing Darnold, I think that there's a good chance they do re-sign Darnold. But if they do, I still think J.J. McCarthy will take the job. It's no longer going to be this $50 million yearly contract where they trade McCarthy and just roll with Darnold to the future. It's going to be like, okay, we'll roll this back. We'll give you a 2-year deal. And then McCarthy is going to be in the wings waiting for any opportunity, which Darnold will present. And so I like the idea of just checking in your league, especially if, it's going to be a little harder in Superflex, but, just check and be like, is the manager of J.J. McCarthy terrified? Because Kyle, you said it, you're not sure what to do with him. Like, you really don't know, should you be buying or selling? There's going to be managers who don't know, and they're going to be like, oh, I can get something for this guy who literally might never be anything, but he will get a chance to play quarterback.
Do you think, so like in a Superflex league, do you think that you could get him Betz for a late first-round pick?
That was the exact price that came to my mind that I think I would do it for. Because if you do need a quarterback, especially in Superflex, this class is not very strong, right? Like, it's kind of like the top 2 in the class at the top. We'll see on Jalen Milroe, but like, it's pretty much Shador and Cam Ward are kind of the top 2 names in this class. Behind those guys, it's like, man, this is pretty rough. So if you need a quarterback, I think that's definitely viable, and that's kind of the price I'd be willing to trade to get him.
I think that's one of our better, it's one of the smarter things that I think we've stumbled into, is that for these players that either miss a year or, part of the year was just truncated, you get to compare them to the next year's class and say, okay, where would you take them if J.J. McCarthy was a rookie here? And put them in that class. Let's say you had him at QB3. Well, I bet most people in your league are not thinking about J.J. McCarthy as the QB3 in the 2025 class. They're kind of pushing him down the road. And so you could say, like, hey, instead of taking a shot on some of these other dudes who I don't even know if they're going to get the draft capital, then I'm going to give up my 110 and acquire someone who could, if he's your quarterback 3 in a Superflex league, that's awesome. You get to figure it out, see if there's some upside. And in the comps, I went back at that doc to make sure, like, okay, what were we thinking last year? And I don't know if you feel this way, Jason. Is it okay to go back to our this is what I thought of him as a prospect last year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what you have to do, right? You don't have anything else to go off of other than one amazing preseason game where it might have inflated you a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, you've got to look at what he was as a prospect. If you thought he was going to be trashed, you're not the right person to go call your shot and trade for him. I echo what Betz' analysis was. I think J.J. McCarthy is a very good quarterback. He impressed me on a per drop back basis. They didn't need him in Michigan to be some superstar stat patter, and what he did when he was needed was really good. And now he finds himself in a system where Sam Darnold just looked like a star. So yeah, I'm fine betting on JJ.
The comp I gave last year, I remember I was like, okay, this isn't great because of what he is to us now, but Alex Smith with a bigger arm. And Alex Smith was taken 101 that year, same year of Aaron Rodgers, by the way, that Alex Smith was taken there. We know that he had some scrambling ability, and he did have some big years, including with the Chiefs later on. So I think if you get that type of QB2 production within the first year, but you're saying that's like with Kevin O'Connell, like there is a chance you get a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, and I think you will. I mean, assuming health and all those things, like, again, Nick Mullins was doing it. Josh Dobbs literally traded the week before from Arizona, drops in, does it for a couple weeks, and of course, we know the story there, but like, I just trust Kevin O'Connell that much, and I think if you believe in J.J. McCarthy's talent, that combination of I get to play with that head coach in this scheme with Justin Jefferson, good things are going to happen.
Yeah, Darnold was great for McCarthy's dynasty value in the sense that he wrecked it. He completely destroyed McCarthy's dynasty value, but also showed that J.J. McCarthy might have a lot of value if he gets that job. So, yeah, I like the call. I think it's worth kicking the tires. Don't overspend, but see if you can add him to your roster on the cheap.
Nice. All right, Jason, you have a player that we talked about last week, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Jalen McMillan. I did
not listen to your conversation on him, so that's great. So Jalen McMillan is my trade for candidate. This is on the cheap. This is if someone is gassed up because of the final run of the season and they're like they're a believer, okay, then don't. This isn't saying go get him. He's a bona fide guaranteed superstar. But I do think that there are a lot of teams that have Jalen McMillan on them where and you see this a lot in fantasy football. If they didn't make the playoffs, if they weren't a great roster, they didn't experience the ride of the end of the season, the insane 7 touchdowns over whatever the last few games it was. And there are, I guess, here's 7 touchdowns over his final 5 games, which is the second most for any rookie wide receiver behind only Randy Moss. And so you don't know, like, is this a Jahan Dotson situation where he was so inflated by touchdowns and it superseded the actual talent of the player? Or is this more of the late season Amon-Ra St. Brown type of breakout where it's like, it was a month-long stretch, and for Amon-Ra, it was like, well, but they lost this player and they lost that player. It's kind of situation that thrust Amon-Ra into more relevance. Well, both of those are kind of true for Jalen McMillan. I went and I watched all of his touchdown receptions to see how much was him, how much was a system, how much was Baker, like what was the root cause. And, I think McMillan showed quite a bit in the final games, but I was actually even more impressed with Baker and the situation. And what isn't changing next year is Baker and the situation. Chris Godwin is not under contract. Maybe they'll re-sign him, but he's now dealing with another season-ending injury. If they re-sign him, it'll be on the cheap. Last time that he beat the expectations on timeline, right, when Chris Godwin was like rushed back and no one thought he'd be ready, how did he do? Not good. We all thought his career was basically over because he looked, slow and sluggish, and it was just impressive he got back. Coming back again at an older age from a new injury is just even more of an uphill battle. It's basically Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. I think they've got like 100 wide receivers under contract, but the names are, Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Marquez Callaway, Cameron Johnson with a K, like guys you don't know. And so I think the situation is you've got a year 2 wide receiver who's going to be very involved in an offense you want a part of. You want Baker. Baker's playing great. I don't think they're going to lose their OC this offseason cycle, so you're going to have some continuity. And you also saw what you would expect to see from a rookie historically, which is a slow start and a stronger finish. Weeks 1 through 13, he only had 13 total receptions. He was only running a route on 54% of the plays. The last month of the season, 14 through 18, 24 receptions, 80% route participation, 20% targets per route run, the numbers that you really needed to see progress to be like, oh, I think we got a player here. There's a team that needs him, a quarterback that can utilize him, a system that's going to get him some open touchdowns while Mike Evans is, the man. I mean, just remember how great Chris Godwin was for fantasy before he went down to injury. That wide receiver 2 in this system is really valuable. So when I look at it, I think there are some McMillan teams out there that don't know what they have. If you just look at the end of the season numbers, it wasn't great. If you really paid attention the first half of the season and then you kind of were out of it, this dude sucked. He wasn't a thing. I don't think people are going to be squeezing onto him with death grips and not letting him be released, and this is the type of player I usually like to add in a package deal where it's like, the trade is around these other guys. But what do you think of McMillan? I'll throw in this for, you add McMillan and just kind of squeeze him on because there's a chance here that it was a true breakout. And if it was, then you only have so many shots at young second-year wide receivers to acquire before a breakout. And this is similar to what Betz was saying on J.J. McCarthy. You just kind of got to call your shot here. You got to say, I believe. And if you do, go get him and hope that the value – because I think the truth is going to be it's going to be a hit or a miss. I don't think it's going to be a neutral like, okay, he's Sterling Shepard. You're either going to have a guy that breaks out or you're going to have a guy that is, usurped. And so the chance of a breakout is an impactful thing that takes a middling roster and pushes it towards a championship roster in Dynasty.
Betz, so we were going back and forth and when you listed some of the comps, like, oh no, is this Jahan Dotson? Oh no, is this Gabe Davis? Oh no, is this Martavis Bryant? And his usage is different. He didn't just step in and play the Godwin role. Like, they kept him outside and he was good at it. And it seems like he's going to be a valuable role in year 2. I just worry, like, if you did stink, if your team stunk and he didn't do anything for you, it didn't do anything till the playoffs, you're like, sweet, I found some gold at the end of the year. If you did make it to the playoffs, then he became a valuable piece. So I just wonder what his value is going to be. I don't know. What do you think, Betz?
Yeah, I feel like he is the most, on our list today, he's like the most value-sensitive player that I would consider trading for or away. Like, because I see both arguments where it's like, what he did down the stretch is just not sustainable. From like a touchdown, fantasy points per route run type of standpoint, like certainly he will regress. At the same time, he is tied to Baker Mayfield. And we joked last week, we're like, that's not a sentence I thought I'd be excited to say, 3 years ago. But he's tied to Baker Mayfield in a very good offense where the opportunity should be there. So to me, it's like if your league mates are kind of saying, oh, he's definitely going to regress, like, this won't repeat, then, I'm willing to take a shot and acknowledge that the opportunity is there. At the same time, if people in my league say, oh, look at what he just did, this is incredible, he's the next guy behind Mike Evans, no question, I would be willing to trade him away based off of what I could potentially get for him. So I don't want to give a cop-out answer, but it's just kind of value-based for me on McMillan.
Right. Looking at kind of where he is and just consensus Dynasty rankings, sitting right now around wide receiver 40. So, if that's really where someone is valuing him, I think you can acquire him fine. And there are pieces that, I look at a couple of Buffalo Bills where I think both of these pieces you could I believe you would get the deal done if you offered Keon Coleman for Jalen McMillan. You might be able to get Jalen McMillan plus something, or even Dalton Kincaid to a tight end needy team where I would rather take the shot on the breakout for Baker from what I saw from kind of those 3 type of players this season.
Yeah, and maybe it's team makeup because I look at that and I go, I think I might want Keon Coleman if I'm trying to shoot for the moon. If I'm trying to get a 10 touchdown season, I think there could be more there with Josh Allen. But maybe what your roster needs is a flex. And it feels like the floor is going to be a lot higher with Jalen McMillan. And, there's just opportunity in the offense. So we'll see what they do with Godwin. Last year, Godwin went down and they were like, let's just run Sterling Shepard out there. Let's give Cade Otton a ton of targets. And they were kind of fine with it. It worked for a while. And then at the end of the year, they kind of peppered McMillan, especially when they got in close. So what's his ceiling? What's his highest fantasy outcome that you could see in a season? Because to me, it's hard to see something higher than like wide receiver 18.
Yeah, I was going to say wide receiver 15. I think he could break out to be a very consistent wide receiver 2 for your fantasy roster. I would agree that, like, if you're just talking best case scenario for both players, Keon Coleman's double-digit touchdown potential seems like it's higher, which is ironic for a player who just had 7 touchdowns in 5 games to say that his touchdown outcome isn't higher, but Josh Allen, greater sign over Baker, which is why I think you can get the deal done.
I went back and I posted the video of Jalen McMillan's first target in the NFL, because that's usually like what's first on our mind. Remember James Cook, his first carry was a fumble. We were like, oh God.
Wide open down the right sideline, wide open.
And drops it. And it's like, okay, at that point, and then really the first, 13 weeks of the season, would we have all said like, oh man, we just missed on this player?
Oh yeah,
for sure.
I feel like at that point you could have had managers wanting to just drop him. Not that you would drop a rookie, but
Betz would have taken Jalen Polk instead of Jalen McMillan.
Oh goodness, it's over. We talked about Jalen Polk last week too. Definitely don't trade for him.
All right, I'm going to give one more name, and I want to see if you guys feel this way. If the vibes with Justin Herbert match where his dynasty value is. Because the last thing on our mind is this guy threw 4 interceptions. Hey, that was more than what he did in the regular season. You only saw that stat 1,000 times on every single person's timeline. So from the playoffs, I think the vibes were, oh, this didn't work. I also looked at it as, man, this team needs 1 or 2 dudes. They need 1 or 2 more playmakers somewhere on this team other than Ladd McConkey. But from week 8 on, Justin Herbert had 8 top 12 performances. The ceiling wasn't really there, but you saw how they kind of opened up the offense after the first month. Greg Roman was like, okay, I tried my ways. Let's go on bye week. Let's figure things out. I have this quarterback who has a massive arm, and they were 6th in neutral pass rate from then on. You saw that they had the explosive pass plays. He averaged almost 19 fantasy points per game after their bye. So I think we'd all say the Justin Herbert we saw the rest of the season is the Justin Herbert that we love. He can be awesome in play action. He has a huge arm, and he was way more efficient. And the best part about Justin Herbert that I think we're not talking about is he was running more. Like that's what I like. We kind of talked before the season. You could get those opportunities of him running more. So he was super efficient. He was the best passer on play action in all of football per PFF. And so my question is, do you think Justin Herbert right now is being undervalued based on what we saw at the end of the season? And really, we didn't see a high-end finish. It was QB 13. I think he can finish higher than that this next year, and I think you can acquire him on the cheap.
Yeah, no, I personally, I love that. We talked about it on the main show Tuesday, which, we brought up Herbert. He was one of the Truth Series quarterbacks, and we talked about, do we think he's going to have really fantasy impactful seasons over the next 5 years with the hard dog system? And I do. I believe in talent. And Harbaugh loves Herbert. Herbert's a great NFL quarterback. I think he's going to get more weapons. Right now his weapons are first and second year wide receivers and a journeyman tight end. Those 2 main wide receivers, Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, they're under contract for the next several years because they're on their rookie contract. So there's only going to be additions made to this passing game, barring season-ending injuries. I do think that Herbert's too good to just be the quarterback 15 year in and year out in fantasy football.
Agreed. I don't have too much to add there. I just think buying into the offense makes a lot of sense when you think about second year in the system coming up, adding potentially more dynamic playmakers. No disrespect to like Will Disley and DJ Chark and Huge and those guys, but Ladd was it, right? Like give him a second weapon and he can really take off. I love the point that you brought up, Kyle, about the rushing with his legs, because that's been a fixture of Greg Roman's offenses throughout the time he's been in the NFL. And obviously Lamar Jackson's like a special case, but I think that rushing production, not that it's going to be elite by any means, but like a little bit of a difference maker to potentially separate him from being like the quarterback 15 to like the quarterback 10, 8, somewhere in there. Like I think it can give you enough of that rushing production to make a difference. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm definitely buying on Justin Herbert.
Do you think people, they're pretty close in a lot of rankings I'm seeing, but would they rather have Justin Herbert or Bo Nix right now?
Ooh, Bo's hot right now.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
I think people would still rather have Herbert. But Bo Nix, simply because of pre-NFL draft bias, mixed with, we've seen some rookies come on hot and then regress in year 2, a la CJ Stroud. So I think there will be some concerns with Nix a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, like, would that be something this offseason that you would try to get done? Let's say that the Knicks managers or the Herbert manager's like, okay, I'll do Bo Nix and a second for Herbert.
You would get Bo Nix in a second?
Yeah, I'd give up Bo Nix in a second to get Justin Herbert.
I think it's fine.
Or is it that close that it doesn't matter?
I think it's that close where I'd rather have the player, because I like both Nix and Herbert.
Agreed.
If someone is hot and bothered for Nix and I could flip that, put the second on the other side, heck yeah.
Would love. Jason just wants some picks. I got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. We're gonna
wait a minute, Kyle.
No,
we can't go to the trade away yet because
breaking news.
We have breaking news and more reasons to trade for J.J. McCarthy. The Vikings are using virtual reality to continue McCarthy's development during rehab.
Let's go.
We talked about this on the main show about how Jaden Daniels gives so much credit from his college days of what virtual reality did for his progression, reading, just overall play. And then same in the NFL, he demanded that whatever franchise drafts him institutes the virtual reality programming. And we said other teams are going to pick this up and start doing it because it just makes sense. I mean, so apparently what Daniels was doing is basically playing against 1.75 speed. So everything's sped up in there and you got to make decisions quicker and figure it out. It's like playing a video game on hard mode and then making it a little easier, but all the more reason, Betz, good call on the J.J. McCarthy. I mean, clearly he's going to Jaden Daniels this next season.
Obviously. There's no other outcome that exists now because of the virtual reality training. Locked in top 3 guy, no questions.
Yeah.
What are his breakfast habits?
Ooh, that's a good question. I imagine he's there very early. He seems like that type of guy.
Coffee with Justin Jefferson. That's what I hope his morning routine is.
I just love that. I mean, Jaden Daniels, we all love him. We love his demeanor. And it's like this mix of you look so calm out there, and yet we know how much work you've put in over this last year just to not just win a Heisman and everything else, but just everybody loves you and everybody wants to sign there now. Like you've changed the entire course of an entire franchise, city, everything else that everybody wants to talk. My neighbor across the street every single day reminds me that this was the greatest thing that's ever happened. He's a Commanders fan.
It's a great time to be a Washington
so happy.
fan.
I know. Hope they beat the Eagles this week.
One game away from the Super Bowl.
I love Jaden Daniels,
Are you nervous,
except
Betz?
for Sunday at 3 o'clock. From 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, me and Jaden, not very good friends, but otherwise, love him.
Are you nervous, Betz? Do you think the Manders are going to take it from you?
The Hurts injury does not help. I also think that this team just knows they're playing with house money and they're playing loose and free, and they have that like feel to them. I don't know how to put that in words, but yeah, I'm worried.
Okay.
Saquon's not just having. I mean, it's a legendary season.
Unreal.
It's one of this. We will talk about the season like 10, 15 years from now. I was like, do you remember that one Saquon year that they got bounced right before the Super Bowl?
Kyle,
like, that we'll talk
stop
about
it.
that.
Stop it right now, okay? I'm stressed out of my mind already thinking about it.
Let's talk trade away candidates. And I mentioned earlier that there's some speculation here. You're trying to trade players, and people, when you're putting somebody on the trade block in your league, everyone in your league is like, okay, what do you know that I don't know? Or I feel bad for Jason. He basically cannot enter into any conversation about any trade, about anybody else, and they're like, oh, Jason, you know something that I don't know.
Yeah, it's the worst. There's certain other league mates that are fine. We just trade. We're just people. And then there's certain league mates where it's like they won't trade with me. Like I've got some kind of player in the locker room telling me something specific, which I've got very few of those.
But you have some.
I have a couple of those. I have a couple.
Yeah, we got a handful of those.
I got a guy. I got a guy. Okay, so a lot of times this has to do with an age cliff, and people are not stupid when they think this player's too old. But there are some players that you can mine out, and they get older, and they're still good. I think one of the best ways for me is to find some behind-the-scenes efficiency metrics that players in my league aren't going to look at, and I obviously get to look at every single day, and kind of just say, like, this is trending in the wrong direction. A lot of times we look at players, and we go, okay, that was just 1 year. But if it's like 2 or 3 years where some of the behind-the-scenes stuff is going in the wrong direction, we're like, you can't really reverse course in the NFL, especially for running backs. It's one of those places like, okay, you're not forcing as many missed tackles, you're not as elusive, you don't catch as many balls. Like, that's not a good direction. So, Betz, you have a name here first. It is a running back that I was so grateful to find in Dynasty in a league. He was my RB2, and I rode him the rest of the year. And right now, I've gotten a couple offers on him, but I don't know how I feel about him.
I'd be interested to see what those offers are, because the guy I'm going to talk about is Chase Brown. And I just want to reiterate before I give the case is that this is a market-based trade-away candidate. If you are a contender and you still think that you can compete and win this upcoming season, you've got that roster to run it back, I'm fine keeping Chase Brown. But if that's not you, I think now's a great time to capitalize on the year he just had, which down the stretch, I mean, he was the dude. Played 85% of the snaps. The only running backs that were on the field more than Chase Brown in terms of snap share were Kyron Williams and Chuba Hubbard. Like, he never left the field, and so he was just an insane volume play where he was averaging 24.4 opportunities per game. Only Saquon saw more from week 9 on, which is when Zach Moss left due to injury. So he was incredible for fantasy. The problem for me is that I just don't know how talented Chase Brown is in terms of like broken tackle rate, yards after contact, rushing yards over expected. Some of his pass catching metrics like yards after the catch per reception, yards per out run, they're pretty middling in like almost every category. But it doesn't really matter how good you are or aren't. If you're on the field all the time and you touch the ball 22, 23 times per game, you're going to be good for fantasy. And that's basically what Chase Brown was in a very good offense. And so for me, like I said, if you have him and he's your RB2, like I'm fine keeping him unless you get an offer that you're blown away from. But I think it's just a good time to capitalize where just, 4 or 5 months ago, he was kind of thought of as like I'll take him late in startup drafts and just hope for the best. And if nothing happens, so what? And now he's being valued as basically a fringe top 12 dynasty running back. And for me, I think that's a little bit too rich for where he was previously and kind of what he could be this year. Remember, he's a previous 5th round pick. There's not a ton of financial compensation here for the team to buy into him for years to come. So I think he's got a short-term window here in the NFL. And at running back, just in general, I'm always willing to flip those guys, especially if I think the return is pretty good. So I went to keep trade cut, looked at from 12/31, so New Year's Eve, to today, some trades that went down with Chase Brown, just to get an idea of like what the market is doing. There was a trade, Chase Brown straight up for T. Higgins. There was a trade of Chase Brown for Chris Olave plus Travis Etienne, Chase Brown, and a third for a 2025 first this year. Those are all trades I'd be willing to do. So if something similar is available to you in your league, I think it's a good time to do it.
If he's being valued that high, goodness, I would certainly capitalize on that.
The offer I received was a late first plus Jalen Wright, and I have Devon Achane. So it's basically like, Jalen Wright's whatever, get some insurance. It's kind of, this person knows my roster, but it's like, is the 111 that valuable to me? It's like, I'm a contender. It feels like one of those trades where I could do it. I think the value's fine. But if I get one more year, maybe not at this level, but if I get RB2 production, I still feel like have a player that's valuable for my roster now.
Yeah, the question really comes down to whether you believe that they're going to they're going to see what he did and say, you are our guy going forward. Because what he did was really on the basis of a Zach Moss injury. They brought in Zach Moss, and it was pretty close to a 50-50 timeshare. Before Zach Moss went down, yeah, I think Chase Brown had kind of overtaken, and he had played well, even in the timeshare. But he wasn't thought to be a bell cow running back that would get the type of workload that he received down the stretch, and I don't think he would have at all if Zach Moss didn't get injured. So the question is, going into next season, do the Bengals bring someone else in? Is Zach Moss back and healthy? What is the plan? Because obviously, if you roll back to next year, it's something you're going to have to kind of call your shot on early enough on. If they roll back into next year where they're not adding much of anything to the backfield, and it's Chase Brown's job, and they're just handing it over to him, the Joe Mixon role, well, then you'd make a huge mistake to get rid of him. I don't anticipate that that's going to be what happens.
Yeah, I think this is a trade that I would do now, where like you can see that possibility that might exist, and somebody's willing to buy into that hope. But if your return on that, if you get a first for him or something, I'd be willing to reset with that rookie pick and kind of hope to land a definite starter on your roster for years to come, versus like, I think Chase Brown might have value this year, but beyond this season, I have no idea. So that's why I think it's just value based. If you can get that value for him, I like it. But you have to acknowledge, like, if they do run it back with what it was, he's going to be very good for fantasy again.
This might be a good player to gauge. I mean, a lot of times we talk about Dynasty as its own thing, but we use redraft data and redraft ADP all the time to kind of like get a gauge of your league. And so if I were to guess right now, where does Chase Brown go in redraft leagues in August? If he's the dude, it feels like a second, third round pick.
He'll be in the second.
Yeah.
If they don't add someone, he will be enormously high. He'll be drafted to be a top 10 running back for sure.
And I'm assuming my gut says like, whoa, that's too high.
I think it's too high as well. The situation that happened this year where the Bengals defense was the worst, they had to do so much offensively, and the injuries to the other running backs there. I mean, it's not that it can happen, but I doubt it happens again that perfectly next year.
I've somehow got hit with this ad. It was NFL Canada. But there is a really good year this year for Canadian running backs. Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard in the second half just balled out for Team Canada.
Go Canada.
Good job, don't you know?
I don't know many other Canadian dudes in the NFL. But Chase did it for a whole country. Jason, you have a name on here that I think we're in agreement because it feels like it's the right time to maybe trade him away.
I think it's the right time. I think this offseason is the right time. If you want to be a gambling man, I think you might be able to get more value later on for Tyrone Tracy Jr., the rookie sensation at running back who was, one of the best rookie. There weren't a lot of rookie running backs that showed out. You had Bucky Irving, and then I would say after that, it's Tyrone Tracy Jr. He looked really good. He wasn't the starter for the first month of the season. He was playing behind Devin Singletary. But once he took over that role, he was the running back 15 from week 5 on. And the Giants are a big market team. It's dumb, but you've got to factor that into your leagues. Know your league mates. I know when I can trade a Packer to Jeremy for more value than he's worth. I know when I could trade a Tyrone Tracy to a Giants fan for more than he's worth. So if you got a Giants fan, definitely hop on that. But the reason why Tyrone Tracy is my trade away candidate is because everyone is so desperate for young running backs. You know what I mean? You're going to get a team that really wants the value of what Tyrone Tracy represents. He is a second-year player who had a breakout campaign, overtook the presumed leader, and I don't think – this is why I'm saying you might get more value later. There's so many holes on the Giants roster. I can't imagine them filling it with a running back, going out and spending high dollars on a running back free agent. They obviously just let Saquon go. That's not their plan. Spending a high draft pick on it? No, they're going to say, I've got Tyrone Tracy. We found a diamond in the rough in this 5th round pick. But here's the thing. when you don't have high draft capital in a player, almost always, and I mean that we're not talking like 60% of the time. I'm saying there are a handful in all the 100 running backs that have been drafted round 4, 5, 6, 7, over the last decade. You can pick out very few that you can hold in one hand that broke out and stayed relevant, that actually continued to have a career. As soon as something goes wrong for this player, they don't have the leash. Look at Dameon Pierce a couple years ago. Sensational rookie campaign, 4th round pick, breaks out. The team adds CJ Stroud, and it's like Dameon Pierce was in redraft, not this current past season, but the season before. He was heavily sought after. It was like, this is a guy who showed enough as a rookie, and they didn't really bring anyone in to challenge him and say, they said it's your job. And then he didn't do great with it, and they didn't have a leash for him. It's like, okay, well, let's try someone else. Let's get a committee going. They're not going to just say, well, I know you've had a bad month-long stretch, but we're just going to keep giving you the rock because your rookie season was so good. There's a reason that he fell in the draft. Part of it is his age. He's an older incoming running back, so that's, for Dynasty, that's already bad news. You're not going to get a big second contract from this player. But I guess I just believe that later round running backs who break out, and we've seen it a lot, whether they're undrafted like a Phillip Lindsay, James Robinson, whether it's Dameon Pierce, guys who come in and legitimately are good. They just proved on the NFL field that they can get the job done. When it doesn't work well for them for a stretch of time, you just don't keep getting the opportunity. They will bring someone else in. They will replace you. They will the next year go out and sign Joe Mixon and say, we need a running back on this roster because Dameon Pierce ain't it. Bucky Irving, I think, proved to me the rare later round rookie running back draft pick where it's like they're going to commit. And he was so good that I don't see him just failing next year. Tyrone Tracy was good.
But Bucky's the outlier.
Yeah, Bucky's the outlier. I'm willing to bet on Bucky because the talent was so superior to what we saw from Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy was like, I'm so proud of him. You know what I mean? He went out there, he caught a bunch of passes, got the work, looked better than Devin Singletary, made some good runs. I'm really proud of him. But he wasn't a sensation. He didn't go out there and make plays that no one else can make. And this is not a team that is invested into him. If things go poorly this season for the Giants, not only are you going to have upheaval and changing the guard, Brian Daboll will be out. The whole coaching staff will be out. Maybe the general manager. Like, they are not invested in Tyrone Tracy. It's just a good story. But if you can sell that story as we've got a year 2 running back who's going to be, a running back 2 or better to help your roster, and you can get value for that, I don't think Tyrone Tracy has any kind of long-term staying power.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And I think sometimes when you take a guy in your rookie draft and they are a massive hit for where you took them, it kind of feels like you have to keep them and like they're your dude for the next couple of years. Like if you took Tyrone Tracy in the 3rd round of a rookie draft, which I did a bunch because it was like, I could see the path. It's like, okay, great. Like I got an awesome return on that investment, but now I see where it goes south somewhat quickly. So I agree with you. He's one of my favorite trade away candidates entering this season. I love the point that you brought up about the coaching staff. Man, it kind of feels like they're on their last legs there, in New York. And if they're gone, there's nothing that ties Tyrone Tracy to that team as far as a focal point. So I'm with you.
That's a good offseason exercise of looking at teams and saying, okay, well, they said they're going to keep Dable for one more year, but you're also anticipating a year or 2. Now, we're not trying to project for every single player, but you are looking at certain teams like, okay, this could shift. And so when you're looking at who's in front of you right now, like this could be completely cleaned house. And Singletary is under contract for one more year. They spent actually a good amount of guaranteed money. But yeah, usually we bet against these type of players, and there's probably someone in your league that thinks this guy is going to be an RB1. Like people are going to look at him as a fringe top 15 dynasty running back, and he's just not that. Jason said the history says that these are the kind of players that you bet against. I want to bring up one more name, and this is a team that I want to get y'all's feels because I think a year from now it could be very different. And I could be wrong about this player in Dynasty, But the Colts scare me because we've had 2 years under Shane Steichen. We've had 2 years under Anthony Richardson. And I know our hopes for fantasy of what they could be. I think all three of us are like, sweet. For fantasy, this is great. For NFL standards, a year from now, I'm going to ask the question, is Anthony Richardson the starting quarterback of this team?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Is Shane Steichen the head coach of this team?
No, they're tied together.
They're tied together. Okay. So it would be easy for us to say trade away Anthony Richardson, but nobody wants him. I want to bring up Jonathan Taylor because you might be a year too early. He might still be a top 10 running back this next year. He got to top 10 status, but only by having a monster final 3 weeks where he went for 218-3, 125-2, and 177-1. But I don't know if you guys noticed, Jonathan Taylor's kind of slowly since his rookie year been less and less involved as a pass catcher, where those huge games, guys, he caught 3 balls total for 14 yards. It's an Anthony Richardson problem, but it's also been something where over the course of someone's career, if they're less and less involved as a pass catcher, it's saying something. The only running back who was targeted less frequently than Jonathan Taylor was Kyron. And we kind of look at Kyron as like, he gets the touchdowns, but if you don't get the touchdowns, it's pretty bad. You have some rough weeks. I think this team was not as good with Richardson. If you look at points per game, yards per game, EPA per play, play success rate, it was way worse across the board. So with Jonathan Taylor, if you were to trade him right now, would you get a haul for him? And would that be worth it? That's my question.
I think if you were to trade Jonathan Taylor right now, you're gonna get a haul. You're gonna get a talented player and a first round pick back. People that want a stud running back, you've got to pay up for them.
Could you get 2 firsts?
Just 2 firsts and no player? Probably, yeah. I think you could get 2 firsts for Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to be on the other side.
Okay.
I don't think I would trade him for 2 firsts. Obviously, where the firsts are makes, would you trade him for a top 3 pick right now by itself? Maybe, replace him with a younger version. But presumably when you're trading away a Jonathan Taylor, that's to a competing team. The picks are going to be, mid to late firsts. My only worry, I see John, and so he's injury prone. I think right now I'm worried about them ankles, man. I don't know what, he's got to tape them different or something. I feel like he's missing games every year, massive, stretches of time. That worries me, but I believe that Jonathan Taylor is one of the rare special players. One of the, we saw Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley change teams this year, go to better situations and dominate at a later stage of their career. I don't think most people can do that. I don't think that's a recipe that is common. I don't look at, your average running back and say, oh, there's a chance his contract's up, he could go sign somewhere and be great. I personally view Jonathan Taylor as a special athlete, as one of, the 6 guys in the league that actually could change teams and become better. He's under contract, I think, even in 2026. So you got 2 years for the Colts. Maybe that's bad news for him. That means you'd have to have 2 really good seasons for a good team to go out and make a strong offer on him if he hits that free agent market. But I have a hard time betting against guys that I think are truly alphas. And I think that's really the question, is what do you think of Jonathan Taylor? Because not everybody views Jonathan Taylor as a true alpha. I don't even know if you guys do.
As a runner of the football, I think he is very special. In the game that I play, I think I can find that there are routes where he's not special.
Yeah, I certainly, the quarterback situation for his pass catching. I mean, this was when Anthony Richardson was the starter. Jonathan Taylor was really down on my list. Like, I think his floor was high, but his ceiling was a little bit lower simply because you got vulture touchdowns at the goal line and you have fewer checkdowns. Anthony Richardson does not check the ball down, nor really should he. So there is definitely a cap on his fantasy output. If you think it's funny because if you think Anthony Richardson's going to be the quarterback next year and the next year, it's almost worse. It could arguably be worse for Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. Taylor's so interesting just from like a kind of in your mind, like what you think about him, because what he did in 2021 when he was the RB1 overall with an unreal season, ran for 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns. Like part of me still kind of thinks of like, that's the guy we're still betting on. But I think that's the tough part in the trade market is like, if someone else thinks that range of outcomes is still possible for him again, obviously you bet against that. It's just unlikely to happen. But if someone else is like, the shine's worn off, like I'm not as into him, then I want to go get him. So again, it kind of feels like one of those, how does your league value him type of trades, because workhorse running backs are so hard to find in the NFL. But I'm with you in terms of what Kyle's saying, where it's like, you need to have an unreal rushing season for him to be a true difference maker for your team, because if he's not going to catch the football at the same rate as some other guys, weekly, the ceiling is tied to touchdowns pretty much only. And right now with this version of the Colts, there's a lot of change happening, whether it's like, quarterback in or out, offensive line wasn't as good as we thought it might be. The defense was a complete train wreck. So if the offense and the team is just better and scoring more points, then I think Taylor can have a special season. But the floor is obviously a lot lower if he's not going to catch the football.
I do agree with Kyle in the premise of when to trade guys.
Yes.
Being willing to be a year early on a guy. Like my original name I had in here before Tyrone Tracy was A.J. Brown. Do I think A.J. Brown's going to be bad next year? No. I think A.J. Brown's going to dominate next year.
That's a good name in this process.
But he is someone that you can absolutely get a haul. You can get a young stud plus a first, and you might be a year too early on getting out, but you don't want to be a year too late, depending on what you can get back. And so really, I don't mind the idea of trying to shop Jonathan Taylor, be a year too early, get something for a stud running back, recoup some youth, add more pieces. If you don't believe that he is, that real alpha productive running back, and I don't blame anyone for not thinking that, because it's been mostly injuries, but after his running back one season, which was now 3 full seasons since then, he was a running back 34, 33, and running back 9 in the last 3 years. He hasn't been special, but that's really been mostly injury related.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, he is a superhuman on the football field. Like, I think that he is not normal. But when I look at where he is in the trajectory, age 26 doesn't really concern me. It's more of, what is this team a year from now? And I did this trade a couple years ago with Dalvin Cook. He was just coming off a Pro Bowl season. He was really, really good. The next year, he was RB10. So, that was really, really good. Fell off a cliff after that. But what I did is I traded him in the middle of the season before, and I was able to get a haul because it was still prime Dalvin Cook, and I was in a trajectory of my team where I kind of knew where I was going. And so I traded him. I got multiple firsts for Dalvin Cook and other pieces, and my team was able to flip faster than what I thought because I was a year too early. And it hurt at first, like a top 10 running back you're trading away. So this isn't a trade him away, you have to. But if you're one of those teams, it makes sense now. And I would say 2 to 3 years from now, you're going to be like, okay, you know what? Maybe Jonathan Taylor still had one more good year. Maybe he had 2. But I still got something in return if that's where your team is at. So would you rather have Jonathan Taylor or Kyren Williams in Dynasty?
Jonathan Taylor.
I think Taylor.
I think Taylor too. Would you rather have Bucky
Kyren
Irving?
was almost my trade away as well. Oh,
Yeah.
Bucky Irving? Oh man.
That's tough.
Bucky is, I'll just say it right now. Bucky is a sexy name.
He is.
I
And
think
the
I go
rookie-
Bucky, but that feels, oh man, a 5th round rookie over Jonathan Taylor. Wow. I think I go Bucky.
I mean, I bet there's people right now, they're sitting on the toilet looking at their rosters and go, I have Bucky Irving. I'm just sitting here just loving my team.
Dude, he's a sub 200 pound running back who was a 4th round draft pick. Oh,
That's how good he is.
That's
This
how many ways it goes
I
wrong.
know.
This is how we
I'm
get
back to Jonathan Taylor.
This is how we're about to start scouting rookie running backs, over the next month or so. And I think Bucky is one of those players because we do all, we come to this agreement, but we all look at it separately and we go, okay, here's what I think about this player. Here's the metrics, blah, blah, blah. Bucky just knows how to run the football as opposed to DeAndre Swift, who I don't know if he knows how to run the football. I know he knows how to be an athlete. And Bucky just knows football, man. And it showed at Oregon. But I think the Oregon bias definitely was tough. Oregon running backs have never really worked in the NFL.
Until now.
But yeah,
I'm looking at some of my notes from Bucky because I haven't looked at this in a while, and I said looks tiny right off the bat. Speedy, but looks itsy bitsy. Has some great moves, great cuts. Not sure he'll get volume in the NFL. Says he's 195 pounds. Yeah, in your bra. Like it was real. I mean, but he didn't. It's funny because his rookie season, he didn't look or play like a small back. So I don't know what kind of like protein shake he got on after college, but I want some of that.
Betz, what did I tell you about how I felt about Bucky
Before the season? Like when we were doing our prospect stuff?
That I felt bullied by Jason.
You did feel bullied by Jason because you liked him quite a bit.
I liked him too. I just was worried his size. He wasn't going to get the workload.
No,
which is a normal work. I liked him on a per touch.
He kind of had the trifecta of like, this is going the wrong direction. Where it was like, okay, he's small. He's not that athletic from like a testing standpoint.
The combine did not help.
Exactly. And then he went
because
on day
you
3.
expect the sub 200.
And then it was like, oh, brother. But as Kyle said,
that was DUN.
Dude just knows ball. He's just good.
Outlier.
Well, that's the thing, though, is there's guys that I'm going to bring up and be like, oh, man, I love this tape. And you're like, dude, that guy's not in the NFL anymore.
I know.
Like,
just shows you how nobody knows anything in the NFL.
Yeah. I think on this podcast, we'll wrap up right here, is that we get to be honest, that there's parts of the process that we're figuring out. You are too. And we're just like you, trying to look at these players in this fake game we play. And we have a lot of fun doing it. So over the next month, I'm excited to talk prospects leading up to Super Bowl Sunday. Next week, we will do a rookie class overview, kind of talk about picks, what they're worth, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.